there, I'm Laura from 5 out of 4 Patterns, and welcome to part 2 of the Meg Dress Sew Along and Tutorial sponsored by the wonderful people at Sly Fox Fabrics. Today we're going to be working on prepping our darts for both the bodice and the skirt pieces, as well as attaching the interfacing to both the back bodice and the back skirt pieces. Lastly, for today, we'll be working on completing our entire bodice and sleeves. Let's get started. It's time to prep and sew our darts. So I'm just going to bring in the video from our sewing school where we addressed the prepping and the sewing of the darts for all those who need the extra help. Pieces. We've got our pattern piece right here. I've cut it out. I've also cut out the dart here. Only on the actual pattern piece, the paper pattern piece itself, will you do that. Do not cut out the dart on your fabric. All right, so we've got our pattern piece and we've got our fabric. The first thing we're going to do is turn our fabric wrong side up. Oops, wrong side up here. All right, and we're going to place our pattern piece right back on top of it, and we're going to weigh it down with some pattern weights. Whatever you've got for pattern weights will work just fine. Okay. Move this down here. There we go. Now the next thing you can see, I have already done it. Whoopsies. I've already done it is I have snipped at the bottom of the dart legs here. You can see right here about 1/8 inch up from the seam allowance. You're going to do that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of chalk or some sort of instrument that you use to mark your fabric with, and we're going to trace our dart. So because I'm using knit, it tends to want to stretch, so I'm going to just make sure I hold it down to the best of my ability and take my time. Trying to get it dark to make sure that you can see it really well. All right, so now let's take our pattern weights off and our pattern piece. Here we are. I have traced our dart in there. All right, so to sew the darts, we're going to fold our fabric right side together. So this is the right side up down here. We marked on the wrong side. We're going to pin along the dart, and starting at the seam allowance, we're going to sew the dart with a straight stitch, and we are not going to back stitch when we hit the top of the dart. All right, so I need to match up. So I've got my snips, I'm matching up my snips here, but also here's my blue line right here. And if I hold that and go to the other side, my other blue line is right there. So we are lined up perfectly. Grab a pin here. Pin it there. Okay, so carefully. All right, you can see that my point, it might be hard to see, my point is right here. All right, and that's where I folded it. And I'm actually going to put a pin right there. All right, and so just double checking that the blue line on one side matches the blue line on the other, and we are good, so let's pin. I know other people pin differently. They might pin going this direction, but I do it. This is just the way I do it. It's the way I've always done it. Okay, now we are going to stitch from the seam allowance up to the point, okay, following our line that we traced. We're not going to back stitch when we get to the dart point, which is up here at the top. We're going to continue sewing right off of our fabric, and we're going to leave about a 3 to 4 inch long thread before cutting. All right, so let's go do that. Okay, we're back. Here we are. We've got our dart here, and we've got our threads that are just dangling here. We did not backstitch. Let's cut our bottom threads. Okay. Now, we are going to, we're gonna knot these just a few times, 3 or 4 times. So when we're talking about darts, there's a particular way to press them. If you're doing waist darts like these, or even on a skirt, you're going to press them toward the center seam or the center of the bodice. This is a back bodice, but the center is right here. So I'm going to press this toward this center seam. Now, if you're doing bust darts, you're going to press them down toward the waistband. Okay, here we are. We have our completed dart, and you can see how lovely. Ooh, it's so nice and classy. Oh, I love it so much. But there it is, there's our dart. It's time to add the interfacing to both the back bodice and our back skirt pieces. You're just going to attach a lightweight fusible interfacing to the center back of the bodice on the wrong sides of your main and lining. And you're also going to do that on the center back of your skirt pieces on the wrong side as well. It should be the length of the bodice plus and 1 inch wide. The interfacing for the skirt should be about 10 inches by long by 1 inch wide. All right, now that we finished that, we're on to creating our bodice. This is where the fun begins, and we start seeing things come together. So the first thing is we're going to place our main bodice, front and back bodices right sides together, and pin and sew the shoulders with a stretch stitch or a serger. Also, you're going to need to repeat this on the lining fabric as well. I'm doing a sleeved version, but there's a link in the tutorial to show you how to complete a sleeveless bodice. So now that we've matched up and sewn our shoulder seams, we're now going to sew the side seams as well on both our main and our lining. So now let's put our main and our linings together. We're going to place the main bodice and lining bodice right sides together and line up the neckline and clip or pin as you go. We're going to sew around the neckline using a stretch stitch, and we're going to add clear elastic. We have a sewing school for this, and I will link that in the description box below. Next, we're going to understitch the neck seam allowance by laying the seam allowance to the lining side, and you're going to sew with a zigzag or if you have a cover stitch close to the raw edge of the seam allowance, and you're going to turn it right side out and press. This is important because it keeps the lining on the lining side and keeps it from peeking out on the main side, and it's definitely worth the press. You do want to press it. Now it's time to work on the sleeves. So we're going to ensure that we've marked the front and back of the sleeve caps just so we know which sleeve to put on which side. And we're going to take the sleeve and fold it so the underarm seams line up, right sides together. Now we're going to sew down that sleeve. With the bodice inside out, quarter each arm opening between the shoulder and side seams, and place pins to mark, or you can use clips. Treat the main and lining as one. You can baste around the arm opening if that's easier for you, but we're going to place the sleeve right side out. We're going to place the sleeve inside the bodice so that the right sides are together. We're going to match the underarm seam of the sleeve to the side seam, and we're going to pin or clip. Match the pin of the shoulder seam notch to the shoulder seam and pin or clip. Match the two other quarter points and pin or clip. Make sure that you have your front sleeve cap lined up with the front bodice and your back sleeve cap lined up with the back bodice. Make sure that you don't get those switched because the front of the sleeve is a little bit different than the back of the sleeve. You're going to ease in the rest of the curve and pin. Sew together with a stretch stitch or a serger. And you're going to repeat with the other sleeve. Now we're on to sleeve hemming. Now I've done the ruffle finish, so or the sleeve flounce, I guess it's called. But if you want to just do a standard hem, you're just going to fold the raw edge towards the wrong side 1/2 inch, press it, and stitch it with a stretch stitch or zigzag, twin needle, or even a cover stitch. In order to do the small hem on this, fold over 1/4 inch to the wrong side and press. Then you're going to top stitch using a stretch stitch or zigzag or twin needle or even a cover stitch all the way around that outside perimeter of that flounce. Pin the inner circle of the flounce into quarters. And then you're going to attach it to the bottom of your sleeve. So the great thing about being done with part 2 is that we finished our darts and we finished our bodice, and we're ready to move on to part 3.